I think this is live.
Hi students.
Right, okay, yeah. Hi, I'm Corin, I'm Vice President Activities. You probably know that if you're following this page. I'm talking with my flatmate, Magnus. They study biology. And we're talking through the green paper that the university just produced. This is a guide on kind of what the university is plans to do, and it has 6 goals of things the university is going to do over the next year. And there's a kind of rough summary of it, which is kind of fairly short, but I'm going to talk through the whole green paper, or we're going to talk through the whole green paper to make sure that, just to discuss all the details in depth so you kind of understand it a bit better. But also, I've not worked personally on this, so we've just read the paper ourselves and are going to kind of summarise it for you to make it easier to understand. The university is looking for feedback on it, so please fill in the feedback form that is in the description. So we're going to talk through the paper. Mm-hmm. So if you open the paper, it starts with some information from the Vice-Chancellor and the CC President. I didn't read these, those are boring.
You shouldn't say
that. So the kind of important things in the document are about what the university does. So it starts with a summary of kind of what is happening with climate change. So the government has committed to carbon zero by 2050, but like our poster here says that's too late. So, because if we do it by then, it's possible, but the kind of amount of devastation that will be caused by climate change will be too much.
Yeah, and it's just scientifically, I think it's like less than a decade that we have left now to limit climate change to 1.5 degrees, which would be much better than 2 degrees, but at the moment we're kind of on course to anywhere from like 2 to 4 degrees warming by the end of the century, which would be devastating. So let's not do that.
Yeah, 1.5 degrees would still be kind of pretty terrible, but less terrible than what will happen. And even the 2050 net zero target is still kind of iffy because it has like creative accounting and not including things like flights, which are a huge emission just because they technically don't happen in the country, and some tedious things like that. So to deal with that, the US has made 6 goals. So they've said they're going to get net zero by 2030. So in this they've included scope 1 and 2 emissions, which are basically direct emissions that they do on campus and through energy use. However, it doesn't include kind of all the other things like flights and things which are, they've estimated it takes up about the scope 3, which is external emissions, things like flights, is about 60% of their total emissions. So they've agreed to net zero for the internal ones by 2030, which is a good goal. I'm still not sure whether they can achieve it, so it'll be hard, but if they do it, that will be good. But it's still a bit late if they're not going to have kind of flights and things included in that.
Well, so the problem with scope 3 emissions is that they're currently not really measured, so they have to measure them first before they can do anything about them. Because they need to know what their baseline is, and then they can see how much they've reduced them by. So that's the thing.
Yeah, so another goal is to measure scope 3 emissions and set a reduction target, because at the moment they don't, as Max said, they don't know what they are. So this is fairly vague, partially because they don't know what the level of emissions are. So I think a clearer response of like how much they're going to slash emissions, and ideally have net zero including in these scope 3 emissions, because these are huge.
Or I don't know if it's like, or it's a good idea to measure them, but considering the like short time frame that they have to do it, and I don't know how they're gonna, if they're going to just keep it like business as usual, measure it, and then start to change it, or if they start to change it and measure it in the process.
So
scientifically you would probably want to keep it the same, but like practically you would probably want to start producing it now.
Yeah, because we have data from flights and things, and they're not good. Or we already know that the university already knows that it does too many flights, and is kind of aiming to reduce that. So, they had one of their goals was adopt a value-based approach to reducing emissions from travel, which is basically saying they'll decide how important it is to do the travelling and then do it anyway. And then do it anyway depending on whether it's enough. But it's kind of still unclear about what would count as important.
Yeah, and they basically propose several different ways to deal with that. So there's points-based system, in which they kind of decide how important something is based on the value of it. So it can have positive value, negative value. And there was a carbon budget for each person in the uni, and then people can kind of trade that between themselves. And there was something else.
I can't remember the other thing. We'll talk about it later in the document. I realised we've not actually just summarised the points, so I'm going to summarise all the goals. So, achieve net zero of scope 1 and 2 emissions by 2030, which I think is a good goal. I don't know if they can achieve this, but it's really important that they do. Ensure that education for sustainable development is in a part of every university programme by 2025. So, this will probably be things like mandatory modules, a bit like when you have academic integrity modules, just something like that that will go through climate change to make sure that it's kind of considered a part of it, because it is so important. If we don't do this right, very bad things will happen.
Oh, it's not actually set in stone. That was, I think, one of our ideas on how it could be done. And what the uni wants your feedback on is how it could be achieved, so how it could be integrated into studying.
Yeah. So then, measure scope 3 emissions and set reductions for targets. So this is external emissions that aren't on campus, basically. And then adopt a value-based approach to reduce emissions from travel. So talked about that a bit. Make sustainability a cornerstone of the research and impact. So put more research, time and effort into dealing with this. And decarbonise the investments, which basically means make sure that all the money in like pension funds and university investments aren't funding coal and oil and kind of extractions like that, which is also more tedious to deal with once you've realised that everything's kind of interconnected. So we want to just go through the document. So the university signed up to the Southampton City Council Green City Charter, which is an agreement to have net zero by 2030, and a lot of other things. So they're working with lots of other organisations around Southampton to help deal with this. And there's some data that that seem to say that we're not terrible because other universities are worse. There are other universities that are worse, and this is true, but that doesn't mean we can't be terrible. There are lots of universities which are better as well than us.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to be the best and lead the way. We can do this.
Oh yeah, another thing that we forgot to mention is that, so those top 6 goals, so they have, they're not set in stone either, so they have some other ones, and they want you to vote on them and tell them if you think that one of the ones that didn't make top 6 should instead be in top 6. So they have a form, it's quite short, it's not too difficult, so do it.
Yeah. So, well, they just have lots of graphs and data about how the university is performing at the moment. This is kind of important. I think the main important graph that is on here is about flights and things. So it shows our emissions from different sources, and you can see a huge, huge impact coming from conferences.
Can this screen share?
No, not easily.
Oh.
So if you look through the green paper while we're doing this, basically about half of the travel emissions are from conferences, and then kind of 12-13% from research, and then 11-ish% from business meetings. So in my opinion, business meetings can all be done over video calls, because I've been doing that for the last month, and it works. It's a bit different from having them in person, but like considering the emissions, it's not really worth it. Conferences, they're kind of mixed, because you do want to, a big part of them is to network with people in person and meet people who do similar research. So kind of some conferences are kind of good and it helps to have them in person, but kind of more things in the UK and not just an excuse to fly around to go to one day conference and then come back. So I think this will be included in the value-based approach, but conferences are half the flight emissions, and so it could definitely go a lot down.
Yes, and then there's also the next one. There's business meetings, then there's international partnership development and student recruitment. And student recruitment is an interesting one because there's a sustainability lecturer I talked to, and he said that the uni was like, oh, you should go to China to advertise the sustainability modules to Chinese students. And he was like, no, that's stupid. I'm not going to take a flight all the way over to China just to talk to people about how sustainable we are. So that kind of thing could be reduced somehow.
Yeah. So it talks about why it matters to the university, which is basically, as a university, we should be leading the way. We should do kind of better than everyone else in the country. So kind of the bare minimum is to be net zero by 2030 because that's what will not kill us all, or what will not result in a catastrophe, hopefully. So that's kind of what university is aiming for. But really we should be kind of trying to go above that and trying to do even more. So kind of including the things in education are really important as well. But really this should have been done kind of 20 years ago. But it's good that they're doing it now, even though it's quite late.
Yes. Or they actually have an interim target of 2025, which is even better. And personally, I feel like it's a good idea because 10 years is still quite a long time, and we were kind of concerned that they would just not do anything and then just pay for a carbon offset at the end of like 2030, and then they'll be like, well, it was sustainable. Hopefully not.
Yeah. So I mean, they have an interim target, so hopefully it will kind of go down year on year. And they've talked about a way to reduce Scope 1 and 2 emissions, or to make it net zero. And carbon offsetting has been suggested as one of the methods, but kind of the aim is not to just do it fully by that, because carbon offsetting is kind of mixed, and there are different opinions on how well it actually works. So it's not fully. You can't promise that planting a tree will definitely grow full age, and it will definitely absorb a certain amount of carbon because it's unclear. Things could happen. So planting trees now is good, but
well, yeah, but another problem with trees is that they're slow. So if you plant a tiny tree now, then it will take a few decades for it to start absorbing enough carbon to actually do much. So it's a good idea to plant trees. If you want to plant trees, then donate to a charity called Cool Earth. It's very effective, and it does a lot of good, but it won't work immediately, and so some offsets are better than others.
Yeah, and as well as planting trees, another big important thing is just to not cut down trees in the first place. So, like, there's huge deforestation happening, so there are charities that kind of aim to prevent the deforestation in the first place, which is kind of more efficient than planting trees.
Yeah, or Cool Earth does both of those.
Nice.
They're really good.
Yeah, so there's a breakdown of the university's emissions. So it shows about half our emissions are from natural gas, or 60% from gas, 55% from gas, 42% from electricity. So at the moment, I'm not aware that our electricity is sustainable, comes from a sustainable source, but I'm not certain on that.
Or, I mean, if it creates emissions, then I'm guessing that it's not.
Yeah.
Because if it's if it's like green electricity, then I assume it wouldn't do this. It also doesn't really give numbers of how many, of like absolute number of how much it is.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say.
Yeah, just percentage. So natural gas is a fossil fuel kind of. It used to be companies used to use coal and oil, but natural gas got switched because it's less impactful. So that was kind of an easy change for me to make while still not having to change the whole infrastructure. But kind of switching more to electricity, which has generally lower impact than natural gas, and sustainable electricity from solar and wind and things, that's actually kind of the most efficient way of doing things right now. And we have kind of really good research in solar energy at the university. So implementing it on campus and focusing more on that would be kind of a really good thing that we could do.
Yeah, and actually, since one of the things the uni wants to do is kind of establish more research about sustainability, maybe they could actually look into making electricity. They want your ideas, so throw ideas at them if you have them. It's quite exciting, honestly.
Yeah.
And then there's also so 24% is from residential buildings, so like halls and stuff, and 76% is from non-residential buildings, so like other things. Uni buildings.
Yeah, so a lot of research things that go on constantly and things like that. So I remember the university used to run a campaign, they didn't run it last year, called Student Switch Off, where they'd have a party in the dark with loads of students to kind of help reduce electricity. But I've heard, or from friends who do environmental science and have analysed electricity of the buildings, I've heard them saying that it's just kind of super negligible because the amount of electricity coming from lights is like fairly small compared to kind of heating and constantly running appliances. So most energy comes in the form of heat. So kind of keeping buildings heat secure and stuff will be kind of a quite big component of trying to make sure that the buildings are better.
Yeah, but also switching to a green energy provider, if they haven't already, would be great.
Yeah. So they have some initiatives to try to achieve the goal. So better meterings in buildings just to have a better idea of what energy is used and work out where they can reduce energy more easily. So trying to switch lighting to LEDs, trying to shut down things off at night when they're not being used.
Oh, it does actually mention installing on-site renewable energy sources, so that's cool.
Yeah.
And buying green electricity from renewable providers. Yeah, that's really good. I feel like uni could easily just have solar panels on top of its buildings. There's lots of buildings, and we have engineers here, so that would be pretty good.
Yeah, and they put make sure that any new buildings are carbon neutral or carbon negative. I'd be really impressed if they did this, because buildings are just a huge emitter of things when you kind of pour concrete and kind of make all that. I think concrete is terrible for the environment. Sorry. Yeah, concrete is terrible for the environment. So, what are they saying? So it'll be difficult to get these carbon neutral, but they say that's their goal. So if they can do that, that's really impressive. But it might just be through offsets. But at the moment, I'm just reading through the document, and it's not clear how that is done.
Or it says, for example, by adhering to BREEAM Excellence Standard, which we don't exactly know what it is, but it's one of the building standards, so you could look into that, or if you know about it, you can have opinions about it and tell uni about it.
Yeah. So all new vehicles are going to be electric, which is reasonable and shouldn't be a huge change. But well, as long as the source of electricity comes from renewables, then that's quite good. But new cars are still not great, so ideally kind of more cycling infrastructure will be good, but a lot of things you will need actual vehicles for. But that's kind of a fairly easy win for the university.
Oh, there's also investment in charging infrastructure, which would be good, because if more people switch to electric cars, and if it's kind of open to everyone, then not just uni students and stuff, that would be cool.
Yeah, they talked about getting better charging infrastructure further down the things in the guidelines. So that's one of their plans, to make it easier to have electric cars on campus. So part of it is it's quite difficult to measure the success. So they've done a category about how would they know they've done it. So just measuring the energy use of the buildings and making sure that as much energy as possible is from renewable energy sources. So they have a 25. They say they have an interim target. Hopefully, ideally they would have more than half of the emissions and half of the emissions reduced by then, because it will be easier to get the low-hanging fruit of just doing things like, well, they've already done a decent amount of the low-hanging fruit, but kind of the low-hanging fruit along the lines of kind of flight emissions and things, even though that is stage 3, and switching to a renewable energy provider. So those things should be relatively easy compared to the other options. So hopefully they'll be more than halfway to net zero by 2025.
Well, they don't actually specify what the interim target means, so I don't really know what it means. They do mention that some people have suggested 2025 as like the final target, because the idea is that if it's really ambitious, then they would have no choice but to do a lot of stuff right now, and the earlier the better. So personally, I feel like it could actually be a good idea to strive towards 2025, but then again, I guess being realistic is important too. So it's a very complicated issue, but that's why they're seeking public consultation about it.
Yeah, so put in the form that we put in the description about how to do it. So they have some questions on here, so if you feel like it, put it in the comments. So what is your view of the 2030 target and initiatives to achieve it? So we've kind of talked about this with each other. Magnus is putting them in the chat. Yeah, 2030 is, if it's done, it'll be really good, but it's kind of hard. And before 2030 would be even better. So ideally, I'd like it kind of as soon as possible, but 2030 is a kind of high-level target that most people aren't aiming for. But kind of sooner is better. So are there any additional challenges? I think we've kind of discussed that ourselves, but if you're in the comments and watching, just see if you can answer these questions. Are there any additional challenges around the 2030 limit that you want to deal with? And who should we speak to, and what resources should we draw upon to develop the roadmap to net zero? So this is making sure they can do it. So they have consulted students, so ideally consult students more about what they want, and kind of energy companies and kind of the building manufacturers, because that's where the kind of huge bulk of the energy uses will be. So just try to make sure to reduce those is kind of a big significant thing.
Yes, and then so the next goal 2 is ensure that the education for sustainable development is part of every university program, and they are thinking of achieving it in various ways. So it's called Education for Sustainable Development, refers to education that supports the Sustainable Development Goals and empowers people to work towards a more sustainable future. So some of the things they're thinking of is delivering carbon literacy training to students as part of their orientation, for example through the Carbon Literacy Project. That would equip them with an understanding of the basic science behind climate change and strategies for personal action. Personally, I feel like you should probably learn that at school, but if school won't do it, then I guess uni can do it, or should do it. And then teaching staff through a train-the-trainer model. So
the lecturers know how to talk about climate change and have it in their courses if it's relevant.
Yeah, and then supporting program leads to integrate the thing into their curriculum by providing training and standard modules that can be adapted. Developing a general digitized ESD module that can be made available to everyone. Extending the influence of ESDs by engaging with the local communities to deliver public lectures, organize student challenges, and hold events, explaining and demonstrating potential action on sustainability.
Yes, that would be like outreach and
Yeah.
contact with the community. So measuring success is an issue because it's hard to know whether or not students know about it.
We don't have much time.
Okay.
So I feel like that's less important to people right now. Anyway, sorry. So the challenges is that it will be easier to integrate the sustainable development education into some courses than others, and so some of the faculties might require additional support to do this, and some programs may resist integrating it because they don't see how it is relevant or beneficial, and also some prospective students or parents can be put off by the requirement to study sustainability in all programs, because people in this country love their freedom, and they'll be like, I don't want to study sustainability, I don't care about the planet, you're oppressing me. So the questions that the uni is asking is, what is the best method of integrating ESD into all programs? So there's different options like online module, carbon literacy training, or integrated into every program in a different way, or something like that. Then to what extent should it be formally assessed? Are there any areas in which it would be inappropriate to embed education for sustainable development? Personally, no. I feel like everyone should know those things. And are there any further opportunities to integrate that across the university? I will paste that into the thing, into the comments.
Yeah. And so the next goal is to measure Scope 3 emissions and reduce the targets. So at the moment, the university just doesn't measure a lot of the emissions, so we don't know what's happening.
Yeah. Actually, do you mind if I talk a little bit more about this education thing? Because I think that's what students will care about the most.
Okay, yeah.
Possibly. So yeah, it's really challenging. I feel like for some courses, or either biology, and even though it is pretty relevant discipline, even in environmental-based modules, they didn't necessarily talk about like real life problems and like social problems that encompass sustainability. It was a bit too narrowly focused on just the science and how it's done. So I feel like that kind of thing, ensuring that real world knowledge is given to students is important, which is why, or personally, I feel like it would be good to kind of integrate it into every program and then make it relevant to your education. So for example, if you're doing business, then they shouldn't just teach business as usual. They should teach how to, how to do business in the new world, like sustainably.
Yeah, so a lot of students do dissertations, I'm sure you know. So kind of encouraging students to do dissertations on kind of relevant things and include environmental issues in that and do more things around that, so that students learn about the issues. I learned a lot about kind of air pollution, because that's what I did my dissertation on. So that was quite interesting to learn and build. But just encouraging students to do things like that more would be, they would go into depth and you'd understand kind of all the issues a lot better.
Oh yeah, and you said that when you were studying business development stuff, they were like...
Yeah, I remember one module where the aim was to learn how to do business management stuff, and all the course content was around, it's fine to do anything as unethical as you want as long as it keeps your business up, which I feel like is some iffy advice.
Yes. I also feel that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on.
Yeah.
So the goal for you is measure Scope 3. We talked about it a little bit.
Yeah.
So can we just jump to like challenges
Mm.
and explain things if necessary? So yeah.
We talk about measurements. So at the moment, the university doesn't measure a lot of things. So they don't actually know the emissions from waste, water treatment, kind of travel, business travel, or supply chains. So they don't have numbers for all of these. So just measuring all of these is going to be kind of a significant part of the problem and trying to solve it. But even if you don't know what the exact numbers are, you're kind of people, or the university is aware that they can be big sources, so they should be trying to reduce them as much as they can before they've measured it. unless
Yeah.
they find out that it's just completely negligible.
Yeah, I also think that I feel like, or as a scientist, I totally understand the desire to measure everything so you know exactly what's happening and then you can come up with a plan on how to do it. But I kind of feel like because this is a time sensitive situation, they could possibly start reducing them now based on the things that we already know are like damaging. Like, for example, flights would be scope 3, so have less flights and then measure it as you go. It won't be perfect, but I feel like it's better to have less flights now than the same amount of flights and then less flights. So there's a lot of things that the uni does that people already, the science is already clear on that they're unsustainable and we already know how we could reduce them. So I feel like they should just start doing it.
Yeah, so some questions they have about the Scope 3 is what people and resources should be involved in measuring it. So I would personally say try to get more students involved and help students kind of run dissertations on kind of the Scope 3 issues and get them to kind of get students to focus on these things in their own programs and just spend more time on that because that helps students and it helps university, but also having professionals working on it as well is quite useful.
I also think so, and I feel like it's also a really good opportunity to give students some work experience, so like internships based on that. That's great.
Yeah, so the university has Excel internships every year. They're quite good job opportunities because they are fairly easy for students to get.
Yeah, I've done some of those. They're good.
Yeah, so kind of more of those around the environmental emissions and trying to make university better at all these things. I think that would be a really good way of doing it.
Yes. So goal 4 is adopt a value-based approach to reduce emissions from travel. Lots of text. So points. So there's 3 options that we discussed a bit. So there's points-based system, cap-and-trade system, and decision tree.
Yeah.
So points-based system, different types of travel receive different points. For example, traveling for fieldwork that is not possible to conduct in the UK could receive a certain positive number of points, while traveling by plane where it is possible to travel by train could receive negative points. So that's quite good. And this tool would need to be accompanied by an easy-to-use calculator to estimate CO2 emissions produced by different versions of the trip. Then second is cap-and-trade system.
Yeah,
Where
so this would be... Sorry for interrupting. You're just reading the whole thing, that's boring. This
Sorry.
is like you give a budget for each person, so each one can travel maybe 100 miles or so.
That's
by
cap-and-trade,
plane.
the second thing.
Yeah, and this would mean you can swap your 100 miles with other people, and then so the university has a total 100 miles per person of flights, and if you really need to go on a flight, you can trade it with other people and go longer. It may be more than 100 miles per person, but the numbers haven't been fully decided yet, and this is...
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. So yeah, or in that version, it's each person has a carbon budget. But I was thinking that maybe we could do something like the university as a whole has a carbon budget, and faculties have a carbon budget, and then like individuals and like module leads can apply for using that budget or something like that. There's a model called planetary boundaries for kind of it's, how do I explain it? So it's like if you Google planetary boundaries, it will show you like this donut-like thingy, and basically it aims to determine the safe operating space for humanity. So you want like global warming and biodiversity loss and land use and stuff to be under a certain point in order for humanity to continue existing safely. And currently we have exceeded a bunch of those significantly. So maybe the uni could try to make its own planetary boundaries just based on their own actions and see how they can stay within those.
Yeah. The third option is a decision tree, which I think is just like a question and answer thing that you go through and say, is this worth doing, is this not worth doing? So, like, how far are you going? is it necessary, and if not, don't do it. I think it's just a bit like the points-based system, but just a kind of easy graph that people can check before they do hands. So
Yeah, but I feel like it's less enforced.
yeah. So
Oh, did you want to move on? So
I think so because we don't have much time.
yes. So the ways they want to achieve it is using tools to track carbon footprint of travel, investing in cycling, incentivizing travel by train, car sharing, and Unilink.
Yeah. So they mentioned trying to help do train discounts. I would hope they'd also try to help do Unilink discounts because those are also kind of expensive tickets to travel places. So
Yesterday you were like, nah, that's fine. But yes, I
Yeah.
also think that.
Yeah. So, some questions they've asked to kind of think about are: is a value-based approach the best way to do it? And what would you do? I think we've already kind of discussed that. So, what factors would be considered? Are there ways this could be implemented that we haven't included? And are there major opportunities to reduce travel? I can't see the question anymore.
Oh, I have questions.
Oh. So Jonah has asked questions saying, I can't see it because it's moving.
Sorry.
Sorry. So this is about the carbon budget, I think. So yeah, if we were talking about if we did it by faculty, I think it is. So yeah, if we did have a carbon budget and divided it up by faculty, I don't know the exact ways it would be implemented. So I don't know how to answer that question.
Which questions?
These questions. So
Oh. Yeah, so at the moment it's all kind of up in the air. That's what they want feedback on. So if you have concerns, like it needs to be independent admin team and so on, then by all means fill in their form and tell them. Because, well, we don't make this paper, so we don't know all the answers. Sorry. But it is a good point because someone will have to make those decisions.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. So goal 5, make sustainability a cornerstone of URS's research and impacts. So I think this will be really good if we can focus more on kind of research and just making things better.
Mhm.
I'm not a researcher, so I don't actually know in detail about how this would work and what this would mean.
Mhm. So basically there's several things. They could make like a center for sustainability research, or they could just try to integrate different interdisciplinary things more, or they could focus on investors and like funders that are sustainable, or they could just make it a greater focus of innovation services, or they could make targets for the number of sustainability related projects in each faculty. So there's lots of different kind of options on how that could be done, and they're not mutually exclusive either. So that's kind of what they want your opinion on.
Yeah. So the university has the National Oceanography Centre, and that's kind of a really big research thing that deals with marine kind of issues and oceanography. So kind of if we want good researchers to come to that, if we kind of lead the way and show that we're being sustainable, then hopefully the good researchers will want to come and research for us. And if we invest more in that, then we'll be like the best at sustainability, and we can lead the way on that.
So I'll put those questions in the comments also. Oh, there's more comments.
Yeah. So there are energy research groups already. So this is good. We want more. or the university is saying do more. So
Mm-hmm.
hopefully they will.
Yes. So final goal: decarbonize investment portfolio and implement an ethical investment policy. So this is something that the uni has been pressured on to do by staff and students because currently they're partnered up with firms like Shell and ExxonMobil and Bay Systems, and they're all pretty bad for the environment, and it just makes the university just not a good look because
Yeah.
they boast about sustainability, but then partner up with basically ecocidal companies, and they are thinking of maybe not doing that.
Yeah, so I remember at the last careers fair talking to British Gas, and they're just trying to get students involved in drilling petrol and stuff like that. So, or even if it's not directly with the petrol extraction, they're still encouraging students to work for them, and that helps British Gas do more pollution because these companies, although there's only a few kind of like huge oil companies, they do so much damage to the world, and it just makes things terrible. So
Yes.
I feel like we should. It's quite hypocritical to kind of encourage students to go work for companies that are blowing up parts of the planet or extracting oil from kind of poor countries and doing things like this, and then just releasing huge emissions. So
Yeah, and as they are also sustainable. So that's why the university has committed, after some protests by students and stuff, to review its ethical investment strategy. So they want to change, but it is not so easy because it can have big knock-on effect on loss of money for uni. So, and also it will be subject to a lot of public scrutiny. And another thing is that a lot of oil and gas companies also make like green technologies as well. So they do work on renewable energy, but a lot of it is just greenwashing. So the uni is kind of worried that they would kind of undermine renewable energy if they stop funding those companies. We've talked about this. We think that maybe they could just invest into actually green companies that do the same thing, and then it's kind of safer because, yeah, they may be smaller, but I feel like if you give them money, they will grow, and you can be sure that they won't just take the money and drill some oil with it.
yeah. So it's kind of hard to do it. So the questions they put up of how do you define investment and what complexities relating to this need to be addressed. So we've kind of discussed that. So complexities are that, well, one of them is in investment companies that university deals with. You can kind of blacklist certain companies, but so the pension fund at the moment is, I'm pretty sure it's just in a general investment thing that the company we work with just moves it around each day just to make us get as much money as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they move it through bad companies, and we can somewhat limit the bad companies, but we don't have full control over where all these investments go at the moment. So
Mm-hmm. You have 2 minutes.
yeah.
1 minute, 2 minutes. So let's wrap up. So other potential goals that they could be included in the top 6 goals if you think they should be. So reduce consumption and waste by embodying circular economy principles. Take a leading role in supporting the city of Southampton to deliver the Green City Plan through research support, for example. Increase biodiversity on campus. Increase the sustainability and decrease the carbon cost of all food consumed on the US campus. This is quite a good one because food is significant. And implement campaign for students to reduce their scope 3 emissions through like renewable energy in halls and private rented accommodation, reducing consumption of high carbon food, reducing airplane travel, and measure impact. So this last one, possibly, or like it's a good thing to do, but I feel like that's just shifting responsibility onto students. So I don't feel like it should be one of the main goals, to be honest.
Yeah.
But food is a good point. Some universities in the UK and around the world as well have banned beef, and a lot of people were angry because they like eating beef, but beef is like the worst meat, carbon-wise, and it's just one product that you remove from your menu, and it has a huge impact because beef is like disproportionately carbon heavy.
Yeah.
So
if you
that
look
could
at,
be a thing.
if you look at graphs of beef, it's kind of beef and then lamb, pork, other things. So beef is like twice as high as any other meat, any other food per kilogram, pretty much. So it's a kind of fairly easy way we can cut emissions. So personally, I think the 6 goals are good ones, but more goals are better. But I think the ones they focus on will probably have the biggest impact if they do them right.
Yeah, well, hopefully these goals that we just discussed, like the potential ones, will also be kind of embedded in one way or another. So they're all pretty good, but I feel like the ones they chose are good.
Okay.
But they want your opinion, so we're not telling you what to say. We're telling you to say something to them.
Yeah. So I hope this is helpful. So fill in the feedback form that's in our description and tell them what you think. And read through the summary if we were boring, because that explains it fairly well. So thanks for watching. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.